Hello, my name is Dr. Ruth Newstifter, or Dr. Ruthie. I'm a professional sexuality educator with a background in family development, and I'm also a relationship expert. Thanks to the folks at funwares.com, I'm here answering your questions on sex and relationships here from my office. A lot of you have been sending me a really common question lately, and I'm sure it has to do with the new year and folks' resolutions to improve their relationship. So I'm very excited to know that folks are focusing in on this and looking for solutions. And that question is, what do I do when my partner and I have different levels of sexual desire? Not so much different things that we're interested in, although that plays a part in it, but before we even get to working on that, what if we both want different levels of sexual interaction? I want it all the time. My partner doesn't want it at all. I like to masturbate, but I'm not interested in sex, and my partner is. Both of us have really low desire levels, but we never want it at the same time. Both of us have really high desire levels, but we never want it at the same time. Or I want to have a lot more of what some folks call foreplay, a lot more of the oral and manual stimulation, and my partner wants to have a lot more of the intercourse, or vice versa. So all these different desire levels, what do we do about it? Oh, I'm so glad you're asking because this, like I said, is a really common problem. So the first thing to know is that there's nothing wrong with you, whether you're the person who wants more or less or different. And there's nothing wrong with your partner either, no matter how irritating it may be for you, the way things end up going and that mismatch. This can be particularly irritating for those couples who felt like they were a really good sexual match in the beginning, and then it just all went down the toilet for one reason or another. And this is also very common. Although some folks, just never really were that great of a sexual click for each other, other folks had that passion and generally speaking, they were both always interested or both never interested, and then somehow those paths diverged over time. This is also very normal, both sides, whether you started as a good click or not. And that's because this is one of the most common problems that I tend to hear about from couples. Let's talk a little bit about what happens when people have a strong level of desire together that matches, and then it kind of separates out after that. There can be a ton of different reasons for this, but let me just give you a few that you can chew on that might give you something interesting to think about or something you can work with. The first is a simple matter of brain and body chemistry over a period of time in your relationship. Research tells us that for the first 3 to 6 months, depending on how close you live to each other, generally couples are crazed about each other. In fact, they have all these symptoms that kind of look the same as being mentally ill. And it is just all the happy, sexy, lusty hormones in your body that give you that really intense sexual desire with each other. It is normal for these feelings to subside in under a year, about a quarter of a year to a half a year, sometimes longer, especially if you live far apart and don't see much of each other. Sometimes a little less long, it always varies when it comes to chemistry, right? So if you feel like your relationships just tend to burn out in the 3 to 6 month period, what this is a transition of feelings. You'll either like each other a lot more in different ways, less intense, crazy ways, or you'll like each other a lot less because those intensely crazy hormones have burned off, and now you go, what do we have in common at all now that this is not the driving force of my life and love for you? So know that that's normal there, and give yourself, some leeway, and recognize that that is a natural transition time for relationships, either towards a more stable, calm type of relationship or out the door because the relationship wasn't meant to last. Now, if we're talking about a matter of years, lots of months, lots of years, and we see that over that time, folks have somehow found themselves with differing sexual appetites, or they always had different sexual appetites, then there's different things we can think of there too. Consider your context and how each person handles stress and the kind of stress they're handling. Someone who's surrounded by children all day long may have difficulty transitioning between the role of being a caregiver and being a lover or a partner. And it can be hard for the sweetie of that caregiver to transition from seeing them as a parental figure to seeing them as a lover as well. So these things can cause major stresses and changes. Financial issues, alcohol and substance issues in the relationship can certainly cause problems. Changes in your prescriptions, talk to your doctor, talk to your pharmacist, and see if these things have sexual implications. They may just be personality differences, but you know what? As difficult as that sounds and kind of ambiguous as that sounds, that can often be some of the most easy things to work with. It takes time to develop the new habits and patterns, but it is something that can be worked with, absolutely. If somebody just likes more than the other, we can come to a place in the middle where both people are happy. And how do we do that? All right, my first suggestion to you is to talk at a neutral time without judgment. Sit down and say, not right now, but at some point, I want to get together as a team and figure out an answer to these different sexual needs that we have. Can we sit and talk about it? I really don't want it to turn into a fight. I want this conversation to be different. I want this conversation to move us in a positive direction. It may not fix everything, but it's not going to be a fight. So don't bring it up right after you've had sex or failed to have sex. Bring it up in a nice neutral time where you can talk about it without judgment and just see where each other is with this when you're not yelling and angry. The second thing is to take responsibility for knowing what you do want and how to communicate it without expectation. So the first half, taking responsibility for knowing what you do want. It's easy to look at our partner and tell them all the things we don't want and all the things we don't like. But when it comes to sex, it can be extra challenging to turn to our partner and tell them what we would like to work towards creating with them. That's a very different conversation than that tired old argument about all the things you hate and don't like or unhappy about, but what you want to work together towards building with them. And this is something that you're responsible for knowing. And if you don't know really what it is that you want sexually, you just know what you don't want, or what you want is, I want more sex, or I want you to not bother me as much. This is not really, this is too vague. We need to know more specifically, like how would somebody from the outside know if you're getting what you want? What would they see? How would they know the difference? Kind of break it down a little bit into those steps of what you want. That makes it something you can actually work towards achieving as a team instead of just this amorphous complaint that's looming over your heads. So taking responsibility for specifically knowing what you do want and then communicating it without expectation. Remember, in this non-judgmental conversation, you're not saying, give me this, you owe me this is what I want from you, I'm so disappointed that I don't get it. What you're saying is, these are the things that it would be nice to have, but I don't know if I'll ever have them and I'm not worried about that right now. I just want to be heard and to have a better sense of understanding, and I want to hear you. So you're communicating it without the expectation that they have to give it to you because you said it or for any other reason. We can move on to whether those expectations are appropriate or not in a different conversation. Right now, that's just going to lead you to the same old fight. Thirdly, consider your context. So keep in mind what's going on. If you're surrounded by children all day and that transition is tough, or your partner is and that transition is tough and how you see them, consider the impact of your context and brainstorm about ways you can handle it. It may be worth the money to, only go to couples therapy 3 times a month instead of 4 and buy a babysitter for yourself on that 4th night and have some fun together, just holding hands in public and drinking coffee or going to a hotel or whatever you want to do. Sometimes the best marriage therapy in the world for folks is hiring a housekeeper to come once a month. Sometimes that has been the most effective thing I've ever seen. And sometimes considering your context does require bringing in a therapist or a sexuality educator, whatever is the best fit for your healing or enhancement needs, depending on what you're looking for. The fourth thing that you want to do after you've considered your context is to co-create a plan of action, but that may be a later meeting that the two of you have. You don't want to put too much into one conversation because you want to keep it positive. So it's the two of you working as a team towards particular goals that you have in mind. So you want to co-create a plan of action saying, you should do this, do it, or going to the therapist and saying, hey, fix them, right? So you're co-creating this plan as a team. We're both going to benefit together, so let's work together to make it happen. The second to last thing is to consider this joyful exploration together. As you work to find a good balance for the two of you of things that you like, and you're taking personal responsibility and you're learning the body language things and all that good stuff, that this should be happy, exciting stuff, not a drudgery. It can be hard to break the habit of not being sexual or of having bad sex, but it should be a joyful, exciting process as well. And last but not least, don't be afraid or ashamed to bring someone in to help you. It is so useful to have an outside opinion that's well-trained and a good match for you in your relationship. It can give you a world of help. If you feel like you don't want to be that kind of person that needs it, well, we hire in experts to help us get ahead in all sorts of areas. Why not here? I'm Dr. Ruthie, and thanks for listening for these tips on how to deal with differing desire levels. You can check me out at exploringintimacy.com where you can find all the different ways to contact me, and I'll see you at the next Funwares video. Thanks!